You can begin.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Rick. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be able to get a chance to talk with you all. Plan to give about 30 minutes of presentation and a little bit of PowerPoint slides to illustrate what I'm talking about, but then reserving at least the full second half of the hour here for questions and answers, and I look forward to getting into any sort of discussion of specific issues that you all are interested in talking about. So I will now take control of the slides here and advance it up one. First, a quick introduction of Energi. Energi is an industrial insurance company. We're focused exclusively on providing risk management and insurance policies to commercial entities, to businesses and private projects that are engaged in making money. We're exclusively focused also on the energy industry. We were born about 10 years ago, working directly in the downstream petroleum and fossil fuels sector in distribution transportation of a lot of different types of fuels. And in those 10 years, we've grown both nationally and internationally and through into different sectors. We've grown into the energy construction sector, and we've grown into the energy project sector, which is what my group takes responsibility for. We wrote our first policy providing risk management for an energy project in January of 2011. And so we've been doing this now for a little over 4 years with a substantial number of policies in effect. 24 master policies, that means that we've got 24 individual policy holders who have an ongoing relationship with us for us to provide specific project insurance, and over 100 projects insured. Our range is extremely broad right now. We've insured projects smaller than $50,000 and larger than $70 million. That scale is both shrinking and growing at the same time. We're going down to even smaller scale projects when they're aggregated into portfolios. And we're going into substantially larger projects, particularly as we see a lot of bioenergy plants where they're converting large masses of biomass into either power or fuel, grow into the several $100 million scale. We've got two primary products. One is called the Energy Savings Warranty, and the other is called the Output Performance Warranty. They're really two sides of the same coin. What we do is we evaluate a project on its engineering merits, and then we put a guarantee in place that says that if the project ever fails to deliver the output of either energy savings or actual energy, and the energy could be in kilowatt hours, it could be in gallons of spec fuel. If it ever falls below that guaranteed output, there's a claim made against the insurance policy and a payment made. And that payment is designed to make up for that shortfall in cash that the project is suffering from having been underproductive. So for anyone, so I always want to make sure I start at a lower level so that anyone who is less familiar than others in how the industry works can get up to speed real quickly. So I threw in a quick slide here on basic energy project financing. Project financing, by its nature, means that you're putting a lot of CapEx, a lot of capital expenditure into the project up at the very front. In this table, I've got it in at year zero, a big CapEx of negative $50 million. And then you're depending on multiple years out into the future of production out of that project, whether it's producing gallons of fuel or kilowatt hours or negawatt hours, priced in some way that yields you a cash flow. And now you've got a positive cash flow in each of those subsequent years. And as those years tick off, they pay off the cost of the capital expenditure up front, and then ultimately start to yield a return to the investors. And then calculated down here on the table, I've got an internal rate of return, or IRR, here of 9% with these very example type of numbers here. The cash flows are what the financier, the investor, is really underwriting. They're putting money up front, $50 million in this case, and they're looking at getting those cash flows out each year. And if this were to hit exactly the way these numbers were estimating, then the investor would expect to get 9% return on that, which is certainly not a shabby return by any means. The investor is going to look at this, though, and challenge exactly what all of the assumptions are within these cash flows, what the variabilities are within the cash flows, what the likelihood of things not working out this way. In some, they're looking at the risk associated with the project and determining whether or not they genuinely feel that it is going to come in at 9%, and not only not 9%, 9% or not 9%, but what is that range of variability? Is it likely to potentially come in at 0%? Is it likely to come in at 18 or 20%? Is there a possibility of that? And so they'll also look at whether or not there's a precision to the way that and dependability to the way that the project has been designed. So it really comes down to, when they're underwriting a project, they're looking at risk management of the project. And an investor, depending on what type of investor it is, whether it's a bank or credit union, a private equity fund or someone else, has various tools at their disposal. And they're by no means ineffective at managing some of the risks, but those tools only go so far. And so they're looking at other parties in the project to help them perform that risk management. As a project developer or a project owner, it certainly behooves you to be fully engaged in determining how to manage these risks best in order to get that investor to come in, provide their capital, provide it at the lowest possible capital rate, and that way get your project in the ground, built, producing, and making money for everybody. So today I'm going to go over the approach for risk management that we at Energi take overall in any sort of energy project, particularly advanced technology energy project that we engage in. And then I'll have a quick case study for a solar project that we've recently written a policy for. So there's nothing like applying a little common sense to risk management, and that's what this five-step process really is. You've got to identify what your risks are, and that means go through thoroughly and analyzing what all the potential risks are, ask everybody and their brother on what they think the risk might be, and get that really big list going here. And then start ticking down those risks in some sort of priority manner according to which risks are most likely to impact the project and which risks have the greatest, the most substantial impact if they impact the project. You're going to eliminate the risks if you can. You're going to structure the risks so that they're better or they're minimized to whatever degree possible. You're going to put in deliberate mitigations, which means putting in action plans and enlisting partners to perform certain roles to mitigate risks. And then finally, you're going to establish an ongoing, what we call operational risk management program, which means that in a continuous fashion, someone in the project is responsible for always measuring, always looking at, always checking on the project, watching for anomalies, and then reacting to them. Because you can't, of course, anticipate everything that's going to come down at you before you ever build the project. So I'll go through each of those 5 steps here a little bit. Identify risks. There's 6 really major ones here that are right at the top of the list here. You've got the risks of hazards and disasters, whether it's a hurricane or an earthquake or just a really bad heavy snowfall coming down. And general liability covers all those other things, the slip and falls, somebody coming off the roof, cars crashing into each other. You have to deal with that, but that's pretty standard. Everybody carries business insurance to cover these things. It's what you bring with you whenever you go to the job site. Every project that's depending on future cash flows also has the risks of market access, demand volume, and the price. The solar world has dealt with this largely by establishing an interconnection with the utility and then writing a long-term power purchase agreement, which locks in both the demand volume and the demand price. And so that establishment of the PPA was really, it was a long, hard-fought battle over the last decade or so to get that established as a standard, but now it really is. And so in the solar world especially, you've got a great situation where it's pretty much par for the course that you'll go get a PPA from a utility that guarantees your market access, your demand, volume, and price. In other technologies that are still either somewhat emerging, for example, energy storage, or playing in a very large liquid commodities market like biofuels, producing drop-in, whether it's aviation fuel, diesel fuel, or something else. There isn't that very common ability to simply reach out to a local utility and sign a long-term PPA. And so this topic is a whole other great big huge kettle of fish if you are talking about one of those types of projects, in trying to figure out how do you lock down some certainty about not only price but also the demand volume, that the demand will actually be there to buy your product. Inputs and feedstock. Again, the solar industry enjoys a relatively easy time with this thing. Your input is sunlight, and so there is certainly some variability to sunlight on a day-to-day basis. We all know it's variable minute to minute as clouds pass in front of the sun. And there's also some variability to the amount of sunlight you're going to get on a year-to-year basis. Some years simply put out more radiance than others. But you've got the recourse to look at meteorological tables. You've got the ability to spread yourself a little diversity around geographies and get things to smooth out in those ways. It's certainly a much bigger issue, again, in the bioenergy, biomass sector, where you're often scrounging for waste, literal waste. And so that waste hasn't had anybody put any sort of effort into making it homogeneous, making it consistent, and measuring actually how much energy content it is. So it's a terrific issue anytime you're dealing with something like a bioenergy project. The last three risks down here, as you can see, I've already put a check mark right next to them saying that the Energi Performance Warranty takes care of this. Technology, engineering, and productivity. And it's worth mentioning that there are a couple of other terrific insurance firms in the marketplace right now that, like us, have been developing products like this. Certainly worth looking at it, but it's a relatively small number right now of folks who are set up to be able to take truly the technology, the engineering, the productivity risk of a project. And I can get into a little bit more about exactly how we do that. But what essentially you're doing is you're saying everything that the engineers of the project are laying out as what the project will produce, well, you're going to bring somebody else in and actually guarantee that and lock that up. So you don't have the risk of building something and then finding out that it only works about at 80% as good as we had hoped it to. We're sorry, we're just going to be falling short 20% on your cash flows every year. That's just a risk that most banks and most investors aren't necessarily fully equipped to handle. They can use third-party engineering reports, but there's certain drawbacks to those as well. So the next one is once you've identified all of those risks, you need to start eliminating them if you can. Wipe them right off the board if you can. Screening out errors with multiple eyes on everything. Naturally, anytime even the smartest of us does something, we're going to make an error here and there. As soon as you put a redundant set of eyeballs on it, you're going to have a dramatic improvement in the number of errors. Tightening the precision. One of the things that we deal with primarily in our business in evaluating the engineering and the design and implementation of projects and then putting our guarantee on it is dealing with the precision of a system. And we all live with some very imprecise systems in our world and get along quite well with them. But then there's a time when, say you get onto an airplane, and you want to know that that airplane engine has actually been working at 99.99999% of the time, because that's when it really matters. It matters a whole lot less whether or not other things work to that level of precision. What's real important there is figuring out exactly where on that spectrum of precision you need to be and getting yourself there through whatever means is necessary. And generally what we found here is that this is where we sort the wheat from the chaff. This is where the folks who are deserving of capital because they build excellent projects that very consistently, very precisely deliver what they have designed the project to do. That's how they get capital, and it separates out those folks who aren't up to that quite same standard, and they miss out on the capital. Structuring the risks. Sometimes you can't quite totally eliminate the risk, but you can structure your deal and your relationship with folks to make sure that you're at least managing that risk as well as possible. And the two examples I've got here are aligning your obligations with your project operations. Certainly you want to make sure that you're on a timeline where when you're expecting to produce things that are going to be able to go to market and generate revenue for you, that happens with a comfortable buffer between when you need to actually start paying people for things. This is basic, cash flow management, but it gets sometimes, you would be surprised how often, kind of laid by the wayside just because of the sheer complexity of a lot of projects out there. So you want to make sure that you've got a conservative expectation of what your uptime is, when you're going to be getting things produced, and then make sure that your obligations to turn around to other folks and provide the cash flow is got an ample amount of buffer. The next one really is how you structure the legal contracts, assigning the risks to the most appropriate partner and aligning the incentives. You want to make sure that if somebody's got the control over the exterior or the external factors of a project, say it's actual usage of the project, or, well, in the case of a solar farm, if the utilities got total control over whether or not they take the power. You want to make sure that they've got the obligation to take the power or pay the penalty for it, or in other words, continue making the payments were they to have taken the power. They've got the ability to affect that risk. You want to make sure that they've got the responsibility for that risk as well. You want to make sure that the project developers who build the facility take that initial piece of risk that it's actually going to work when they commission it. You don't clearly want to let them walk away without having a fully operational commissioned project. And then you've got, on the capital stack, you've got issues around, who's going to absorb the downside for potential underperformance of or late delayed starts. And clearly that should be assigned to the right folks, the equity owners, who also have the opportunity for upside in the event that the project overperforms or the project starts generating cash flow earlier. And then the last bullet here is, we all know that the insurance carriers should carry that catastrophic risk of obviously the hazards like your earthquakes and hurricanes, but insurance carriers can also carry a catastrophic risk for, in our case, underperformance or for a variety of other different elements of the project, so that you can still have the right folks who can affect the positive outcome of the project incentivized, because they've got a little bit of the pain coming their way if it fails to perform, but at least they're not facing complete bankruptcy of their company in the event that the project fails to perform, which could have negative effects on them, sending them running to the hills rather than staying up late to make sure that the project works and comes in under timeline and under budget. Mitigating the risks. This is real simple. There are some risks out there that you just can't get rid of and you can't structure out, but you can build your system redundancy. You can plan for inventory buffers. You can put in. You can understand that your system at that maximum is going to yield a certain amount of productivity, but then put a nice margin between what you expect, what your obligations to folks are to do it. In the redundancy, it's real clear that a single inverter for your solar farm is a single point of failure. So you're going to build in multiple inverters with the ability for some of them to fail. If you've got some new novel technology, and I keep going back to the bioenergy sector here, I apologize for a lot of the folks who are real solar, but I think you'll get the point here. If you've got some novel technology, it certainly makes a lot of sense to build in substantial redundancies, planning for the fact that multiple of those modules will probably either be down because you're still learning on how to keep them up, or deliberately being brought down because you're actually testing something new on them to see if you can prevent future problems or enhance performance on them. And so you're probably well suited to have multiple redundancies there in order to have the ability to bring those partial systems down and really enhance the continued learning that you've got going on there while driving forward a continued minimum amount of productivity. And then the last bullet there, of course, is coming right back to our insurance side. Utilizing performance warranties. One of the great things about utilizing an insurance company for any aspect of insurance is that a single loan policyholder can tap into this massive aggregation of risks across the globe and have the risk then much better managed, because the insurance company has deliberately done that. They've assessed that sure, any one of these risks can be a substantial dollar obligation for the folks who are holding it, but the likelihood of any one of them happening is relatively low. And so if we aggregate enough of these together, we've really got a relatively low total obligation to any likely losses out there. That sort of magic of modern finance really does spread some genuine value around. And when you're doing an individual project, accessing that to manage your risks better at a manageable cost really goes a long ways. The last bullet there, the sub-bullet underneath utilizing performance warranties, I'm talking about structuring your guarantee. The way that we structure our guarantees is to make sure that we're doing the very best that we can to guarantee those cash flows that are going from the customer to the investor. And while guaranteeing that the customer, in fact, would pay would be a form of credit insurance, which is very hard to come by these days, post-2008, when so many insurance companies woke up to the rude surprise that they had an awful lot more credit exposure than they expected. Instead, what we do is we structure our guarantees so that we're guaranteeing the productivity of the project, but in close alignment with that customer contract, so that we're managing exactly the risk that needs to be managed, which is that the customer is failing to pay their cash flow to the investor, along the lines of ensuring the productivity without over-insuring or under-insuring. And what we're really doing is hitting right to the heart of the risk that the project developer and the owner have. All right, then the last bullet here of how to go about managing the risk management is this piece about operational risk management. And this just comes down to, none of us can see the future completely, sitting at our desks planning out our next project. Building in this continuous learning and improvement process means that your project is going to be a living, dynamic thing that somebody's constantly watching and somebody's constantly learning more about, and somebody's constantly reacting, therefore, to the project doing new things, whether it's because of something that you just didn't necessarily know about, the way that the technology or the particular site would in the way they would behave, or because some new external factor has cropped up that was impossible to plan for. In any case, it puts you on the footing if you're measuring constantly all key factors around both the productivity of the plant and all the external factors that you can. And of course, we've got a great opportunity now with this growing Internet of Things thing, where for very low dollars you can have a robust amount of sophisticated sensors spread around your project, measuring everything from electricity, power, and energy, to irradiance of the sun, to weight of snow sitting on your panels, to darn near anything you could ever ask for, all connected in through the Internet and reporting remotely, therefore, up to a cloud application where you and everybody engaged in the project, from the investor to the owner to the risk manager, can wake up with their morning cup of coffee and look at the dashboard and see either all green lights showing, hey, everything's working the way that we expected it to, or a couple of yellow lights all of a sudden alerting you to an anomaly that seems to have cropped up. And that means that you've got that ability to identify an issue very early, investigate those causes, learn more about the way that the project works, remediate it right away, and then go about a wrap-up process of revising your processes so that the project works better and is more immune to those problems happening again in the future. You get two opportunities there, of course, with a continuous learning and improvement process. You've got the opportunity to catch and head off problems before they ever become real problems and impact the productivity of the plant. You also have the opportunity, because you're learning more and more about your project every day as it matures, so to speak. You actually have the opportunity to very often increase the performance, the productivity of it beyond what you had conservatively estimated it was going to be able to produce at the very beginning. So you've actually got an upside there that if you're an equity investor or you are an equity participant as an owner who's out actively managing the project, you've got that opportunity to drive up your return, which is clearly good for everybody and can be good for you too. So here's the case study I threw in here. This terrific, small, recently founded solar developer down in the southeast called 510 Nano. Got a lot of very smart folks doing the work for them. Created some patents, but just doing some really good development work as well. They just recently developed and commissioned a 1.4 megawatt photovoltaic plant down there in Garysburg, North Carolina. You know, the title of this webinar was Risk Management for Large Solar Projects, and after thinking about that a little bit this morning, I suddenly realized that I might need to have clarified that a little bit. You know, as you know, we've got a really wide spectrum of projects in the solar world. You go down as small as a couple of panels on a residential building, and then you go up to hundreds of megawatts with massive plants out in the desert in the Southwest. Our heart of our sweet spot is generally in the couple hundred kilowatts to I'd say 50 or to 100 megawatts. But we do a lot of projects just like this 1.4 megawatt plant, which is smaller than a lot of folks are able to come down to as far as investing and really robust underwriting, just because of the sheer the size of the investment. And yet it's so important, and there's such a large market out there for plants just like this, just this size, if they can get the cost of capital down to the right level. And we hope that we've been able to do that with our partnership with 510 Nano. They were able to secure financing from a local credit union. That local credit union was highly motivated to put their credit union members' dollars to work there in their local community, put people in the community to work building these panels, get dependable, clean energy being produced right there in their backyard. But it's a local credit union, and they didn't have any real substantial expertise in evaluating the engineering risk of a project like this. And so their requirement was, before they funded, was that there be some sort of an investment-grade guarantee of the productivity of the project. Combining that with the PPA, which was with the local utility, the credit union had a very attractive risk profile there, a great big, huge credit-worthy utility, and because of Energi's partnership, a massive insurance company standing behind the productivity of the project. And so that allowed them to put capital to work at a very attractive rate. We tailored our policy to meet precisely what those debt servicing requirements were by the lender. 5-year policy. We could go up to 10 years, but we're never going to write a policy longer than the project really needs. And so in this case, it was 5 years to meet the lending requirements. And we structured it precisely to make sure that the lender's cash flows were as secure as possible. And then through a continuous remote monitoring process of the solar panels and the system equipment, 510 Nano and Energi together, we're able to react in real time to those anomalies that might crop up. We should say might. Will crop up. There's always going to be something that crops up, and the question isn't how are we going to deal with it. It's who's going to deal with it, and how quickly can we get it fixed and the project back up before it ever impacts it in any sort of real way. And so it's been we're looking forward to a nice long relationship with 510 Nano as we continue to build support for them as they grow their business and continue to spread solar projects across the Southeast. So I'm going to leave you here with one last slide, and then we're going to get into our questions here. And I see I'm just a couple of minutes over longer what I hope to be doing. But a good risk management partner, it's something of a novel role in many of the advanced energy projects that we come into. There's a lot of novelty about any advanced energy project. Folks are, in many cases, trying to figure out what the market is, where the customers are going to be, how to pay those customers, how to put together the technology, how to make the technology cost-effective and generate greater revenues than expenses. And along the way, folks often miss out on the fact that in addition to a great developer and a great customer and a great technology provider and a great capital provider, good risk management partner is really essential. Your local insurance broker will do a great job of helping you with your hazard insurance, helping you with your general liability insurance. And they should be your first go-to person in any case. Energi and most of the good insurance companies that we're familiar with depend on that broker. Brokers are absolutely essential, boots on the ground, intimately aware of their clients' needs, and balancing the multiple insurance products available in the marketplace to give their clients a full scope risk management without any gaps, without any overlaps as well. But that risk management partner should really know your technology, and ideally know more than just your technology, because as advanced energy markets develop, they're often searching for answers on how to move forward, and those answers are often being developed in other markets. The solar PPA is something that a lot of other markets are leaning on, trying to utilize in developing their own marketplaces, and other risk management techniques and other technologies are often very applicable to your particular technology area. That risk management partner should definitely be able to aggregate risks across the largest possible number of projects. So scale is important. Geographical diversity is important. A good risk management partner is going to be able to reach back into the broader universe of reinsurers, which allows a much greater aggregation of risks across a whole spectrum of types of activities that are out there. And then lastly, what you're looking for is an investment-grade balance sheet, because what you're really needing to be able to do is translate your engineering, your technical risks into a financial instrument so that your investor, so that your capital provider can evaluate it in the terms that they are familiar with. And they're familiar with looking at credit ratings. They're familiar looking at, and if you can provide them an insurance company or a reinsurance company with an investment-grade balance sheet, then that capital provider can look at that and say, well, I don't exactly know what the technology is that's going on here, and I see it working, but I don't know how to evaluate whether it's going to work on your project. But I do see an investment-grade balance sheet on this insurance company, and the insurance company is standing behind that technology. Well, I know how to evaluate that credit rating on that. As long as that contract policy looks like it's going to take care of the technology risk for me, then that's something I know how to bank on. And that creates a bankability for your projects that otherwise could be missing. So with that, I really appreciate your listening to me and looking at the slides. And I hope that you all have some questions, and I'll look forward to trying to answer those as best as I can over the next 24 minutes. But you've also got here on the screen my contact information, my email. I'd be more than happy to hear from any of you and set up a time when we could get together one-on-one on the phone. So with that, Rick, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. This was excellent. Again, a reminder for the participants, if you have questions for Chris, please chat those in the lower right corner of your screen. You can send it to all participants if you want the entire audience to see the question, or just chat it to host if you want me to ask it for you. The first question that came in from Michael, are these insurance products part of a risk retention group?
No, it's not. I think that I'll answer the question the way I think he was aiming at it, but I'll let Michael chat back to you if I missed the mark here. So the Energi, my company's risk management products are insurance policies that we write, underwrite, and administer, and then they're standalone insurance policies that are backed by most often our strategic partner, Hanover Re, which is the fourth largest reinsurance company in the world. In the future, it may be a participation of multiple reinsurance companies. But that's the structure that we provide. I'll let him chat back to you if that's not quite what he was getting at.
Okay. Next question from Matt. Does Energi actively participate with clients in root cause analysis after a claim?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Energi, I have the benefit of building off of a company that was obviously started a good while before my group got going here. And the company was started fundamentally on two principles, and that's that you put all of your money and resources that you've got into preventing losses up front, and then when there's an incident, investigating those to the most thorough aspect possible to determine exactly what went wrong, paying the claim if it's what you're obligated to do, but also seeking out those who ought to be paying if you're not the one responsible. So I'll illustrate that by saying we'll often come in and put a wrap around a project that has some components in it that have manufacturer's warranties on it. In a solar project, your panels will probably have a manufacturer's warranty. In a bioenergy plant, your turbine's going to have a manufacturer's warranty from a GE or a Siemens. We're going to be a structurally incentivized partner to work right alongside you as soon as an incident has occurred to figure out exactly what happened. And then if it's a manufacturer's warranty claim that should be done, well, we're going to help make sure that goes through because we want to help make sure that that's the policy that pays. If we determine that it's not the manufacturer's warranty, but that it falls onto our policy, then we want to get our claim paid as soon as we can. But it puts you in the position of having another advocate closely tied to your hips who's highly incentivized, has an engineering staff on board, internal, knows the project already inside and out because we've already done our full underwriting of it, and highly incentivized to make sure that the manufacturers who do have obligations to pay on their warranties go ahead and pay on their warranties.
Excellent. The next question from Bill. The city of Houston just did a deal for 30 megawatts of solar in Alpine, Texas, which is 550 miles from Houston to the west. The sun shines much more intently there, about plus 30%. How important is the rate of insolation to making the project work?
I feel like I'm working with my son on some of his math homework now. So, did I hear this? Was the last part of the sentence there, how important is the insolation?
Yeah, the rate of annual insolation, or roughly the number of hours of sunshine per year expected in the area.
Well, so here's what we do. When we're providing a guarantee, we're going to guarantee the output of the project given a specific amount of radiance. So you tell us how much radiance is going to hit the panels, and we'll guarantee that the right amount of kilowatt hours comes out of it. So essentially, we're guaranteeing the efficiency of the panels and the project and all of that. Then the variability there is how much does the sun actually shine that particular day, week, month, year. And there are folks who will look at that risk and will provide you risk management for that. They'll look at all of the meteorological tables, determine what the average and average radiance is and what the variance is, and then they're pooling that risk across a whole lot of projects, across a whole lot of geographical regions, and they'll provide you risk management for that. So it comes down to you can essentially lock up both of those risks with risk management partners, providing you the right guarantees for the right elements there.
Okay, so to clarify, Energi doesn't offer that risk guarantee of the sun shining less one year. There's a volcano in Indonesia. Right. Okay.
No, that's right. We've got we have engineers on board who do our evaluations, so we're guaranteeing engineering. But we work with some folks who have statistical weathermen on board, I guess is the right way to describe it, and they'll guarantee that your sun shines enough.
Huh, interesting. Okay, the next question that we had was, how does Energi go about doing the underwriting?
So Energi, the typical way that you underwrite a policy in the insurance world is through actuarial studies. You take a great big massive database of how often did people crash their cars and how much did it cost, and then you grind that statistical database into some numbers on what's the expected losses each year, and then you price your premiums so that you take in just a little bit more in premium than what your expected losses are, right? So you've got a margin between your revenue and your expenses. We do it a little differently with our performance warranties. What we do is we have engineers on our team rather than statisticians and actuaries. Our engineers get into every single project. They evaluate everything that the project engineers have designed, make sure that it's been designed right, that there haven't been any shortcuts, there haven't been any crude, imprecise rules of thumb used, that make sure that all of the equipment is the right equipment, it's the right size, the system is properly balanced, and then we trust them. If our engineers say that, yep, this has been done right, then we put the policy on it, guaranteeing it. And if it's one of those technologies where you've got a little bit less track record on it, well, we'll put a little bit larger margin between your expected output and your guaranteed output. But fundamentally what we're doing is we're underwriting through an engineering evaluation. What that means is that we don't need 10 or 15 years worth of data of 30 other projects just like this to figure out what the likely losses are going to be. We just need somebody who's really engineered a really good project to be able to put a policy behind them.
And a follow-up question on that, so does what your engineers do, does that replace the independent engineer evaluation like the Black & Veatch or DNV, or is it supplement, or are you using companies like Black & Veatch?
We're not. We have our own internal engineering staff. If we encounter a technology that we haven't dealt with a whole lot, we'll hire a consultant sometimes, but our goal then is to see if we can grow that market and ultimately hire that consultant internally once we've got enough volume for them to be able to do. We like the fact that we've got internal engineers who feel like they're personally going to be the ones who are holding that hand grenade in 5 years from now, trying to make sure that pin has been very, very tightly lodged into it, because they know that the company is going to be holding that hand grenade, making sure that the project performs. So that internal investment in our engineers is essential. And as far as whether or not it can substitute for that third-party engineering report, in some cases it certainly does. We're more than happy to let other folks spend money on an additional third-party engineering reports. But the way that we go about not only evaluating a project, but then actually putting our money is on the table. We're invested in the project actually performing in a far greater way than any independent third-party engineer is, who has written a report, received a check, and disappeared. So we think that, and in many cases, it works out this way, that the project is able to pay our premium, get the actual insurance policy, and at the same time get assurances that a third-party engineering group has thoroughly vetted it without having to spend that additional money on a third-party engineering evaluation.
Excellent. Is there a budgetary rule of thumb about cost of insurance for solar projects?
So our basic pricing is based on what level of insured cash flows you want. So I know project developers are all thinking about, well, what's my project cost? And the investors are thinking about, well, how much project capital do I have to put up? The insured cash flows are usually pretty close to one of those or both of those numbers, you know, your project cost or how much you have to pay back. In our case study here with 510 Nano, you know, we looked at specifically what cash flows do you need to pay back your debt provider. So it means that we didn't, you know, they didn't feel like, well, more importantly, their equity investors did not feel like they needed to buy insurance to cover their equity risk. They were already assuming enough risk in that, but they were getting the upside too, so that they would have a balanced return on that. What they needed to do is exactly what they needed to cover their debt financing costs. And so they said, here's our debt financing costs each of the 5 years. This is how many kilowatt hours we have to produce each of these years in order to be able to service our debt. We want Energi to guarantee those kilowatt hours. And so that's what we came in at. So when you take up all the dollars of that, the guaranteed cash flows, total number of years times the total amount of cash each year, we apply a premium of 5% to that. That's our rule of thumb. We're always hammering to try to get that lower, so we come in at a conservative high end of the scale. 5% of those cash flows is our premium. It's a one-time premium, though. It's paid up front. It's typically rolled into the project costs. If you've got incentives or tax credits, most of the time it does qualify for the incentive or tax credit. So as one of the many project costs, so you can take the benefit there. Gets amortized across the financing. And the big advantage of having that one-time premium paid up at the front, at the beginning of the policy, at the beginning of the project's operational period, is that it gives absolute guarantee that the policy will not be non-renewed or have a premium hike. Your typical general liability policy that's renewed every year, if you have a couple of claims, your insurance company could suddenly come down and double your rate, or just simply say, we don't want to be in the business of insuring you anymore, sorry, we're leaving, and leave you completely exposed. In this case, you pay for our policy up front, and it's locked in, and the bank doesn't have to worry about suddenly being exposed midway through the project because the project had some claims or something of that nature. And then what we're always trying to do is bring that premium down, because we know that as developers, we know as technology gets more and more projects under their belt, they get better and better at it. That means they get less and less risky. And as we go through subsequent projects number 2, number 3, number 4, year number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, with particular policyholders, we're aggressively working with our reinsurance market to bring those premiums down, because we know that the good ones have proven out that they're good, and so we can start seeing that there's going to be lower risk with them, and we can start bringing the premiums down lower and lower.
The safe driver discount.
That's exactly right.
There. Excellent. That was all the questions I had. I'll give the group another couple of minutes if they want to ask any more questions. Otherwise, we can wrap up a little bit early on this Friday before our holiday week begins. Chris, was there anything else that you wanted to bring up to this audience?
Sure, I'll throw in one more thing, just because we've got a couple of minutes, and see if we get another question. There's another element to managing the risks better, and it's a little bit more from the financial side of the equation, but our warranty programs play into it. If you put together more than one project, a whole bunch of projects into a portfolio, then you've got the portfolio effect. You've got diversification. You've got some projects that are going to underperform, but you're also going to have some projects that probably overperform, and start smoothing that out. Now your investor might be able to put together $100 or $200 million that invest into a lot of these projects, like this 510 nano project that's in the a couple million to $10 or $20 million range. Too small to individually take the risk on because just of your overhead costs of getting out there, underwriting and funding the projects. But if you find an effective way to standardize the risk of the projects and then get them all into a portfolio, you can smooth out the underperformers with the overperformers and get a more consistent return on your capital, which in turn means you can offer your capital at a lower cost, right? Well, that's one of the key things that we're working on with a number of investors and capital providers, is to build these larger portfolios of small to medium-sized projects, all standardized because we've put our performance guarantee on them and done that diligence on the engineering basis, on an individual project basis. But then with our performance guarantee, the capital provider can just look at them as consistently as standard types of risks. That allows them to get more capital out, lower cost of capital. It allows more projects to get funded, and it allows everybody to spread their risks around a little bit and therefore get a whole lot more consistency and consistent performance to what they're doing. So that allows us to go real small in the projects where we couldn't necessarily do that on an individual basis, which is fun.
And Chris, to receive this benefit of diversification, how many projects do you need? Do they need to be in different geographical areas? Do they need to have different PPA off-takers? Like, what sort of criteria do you look for diversification?
Well, I think that the question is best answered by a capital provider, and each one of them will have their specifics. With a PPA environment, you've got a fairly high consistency credit rating for your utilities, so that goes right to a capital provider who's looking for that, zero risk on the counterparty repayment level. But there are other folks that are more willing to take some counterparty risk, and anybody who's playing in bioenergy right now is certainly willing to do that. Geographic distribution definitely helps, particularly when we're getting back to what we were talking about sunlight shining in different places. You know that there's going to be some induced variability to performance because of your weather patterns, and so by getting some geographic dispersion, you're going to be able to deal with that better. Some diversity amongst your developers and maybe even the technologies that you're using, so that you're not completely dependent on a particular engineering team or a particular technology that's going out there. A host of things like that. But it's possible now to do a lot more of that than was ever able to be imagined, partly because we've got so much capital that's looking for good places to go. It's just that capital is never as free-flowing as you think it might be. It's always got some constraints and some strings on it, and so it has to see the right projects put together in the right way so often.
Excellent. And since you had a past background in the Department of Energy, I'll ask my a question that's on a lot of people's minds this year is, what is your opinion on the extension of the ITC credit?
Well, it's purely opinion. We obviously, professionally, we are agnostic as to whether or not the ITC or any sort of incentive out there is in the marketplace. The one comment I'll make on that, and this is opinion, is that it's obviously a non-ITC world will cause a pause, will cause a hiccup, depending on how you look at it, in the solar world. But the far side of that, recalibrating everything for structuring projects without the investment tax credit, won't be such a bad thing, if only because it removes a tremendous amount of cost that's right now been tied up with having to seek and secure your tax equity investors before you can move forward on a project. There's both the fixed costs, the real tangible costs of paying the lawyers to structure all the right contracts, and paying your investment bankers to go out there and find and write the contracts for your tax equity. But it's also that intangible, that soft cost of not being able to move forward because you've got this additional item in your critical path before you could even get things going. So it means probably you're going to see a leaning out of the herd. Obviously, you're going to have a really solid economics in your project. But the great thing to a developer and the great thing to a regular capital provider or investor in these projects is that you're going to be able to move faster, get your things done, and not have to worry about that additional distraction of the tax equity piece before you can get things right and really set your project on a path to success. So that's, I think, at least the bright shining lining of losing the